welcome and good evening, everyone. This is Teatra with Freedom Reigns, and tonight I would like to introduce all of you to our new host and a new show here to Freedom Reigns. I'd like to introduce you to Eternally Aware. And Eternally Aware has been doing some amazing things up in Canada, and been helping all kinds of people, and just really making great progress in the freedoms and liberties and human rights of our fellow man. And so with that, we also have Terry with us tonight, who's going to kind of be co-hosting with Eternally Awake. I'm sorry. Anyways, Terry, you know a whole lot more about our new host, and I'd like to let you kind of add your thoughts.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can.
Oh, that's good. I was getting a lot of feedback there, Dee.
Okay, I wasn't having any on my end, so it could be just the way we're connected here. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, hey, I know that you're much more familiar with our wonderful guest and new host, and so I'd like to maybe let you give just a little bit of background of him, and then we'll have him come on.
Okay. Well, I met John about a year ago, and I thought he was great. I learned my human rights because I had no idea what they were until I landed his website, and ever since then, I was just shocked in all the plethora of information that he has on his website and my rights. And in the beginning, I got a little bit angry that we weren't taught any of these in school, but he's the man if anybody wants to learn what is going on in Canada and all around the world, actually, and what's been happening and how our rights have been hidden. And he's the one that can help out. And I'm getting so much feedback, so I'm hoping that you guys aren't.
Well, I'm going to mute out as soon as John makes his debut entrance here, and that may clear it up for you. So, anyways, I'm excited because I know what goes on in Canada goes on here in the U.S. as well as from here to there, and other nations around the world. So, John, I'd like to welcome you, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to bring to us.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I really appreciate the opportunity to do this show. Hence, it is my first time doing a type of blog talk radio like this, so you'll have to bear with me.
Oh, no problem. I'll stick around here in the back. I'm going to mute myself out, and I'm going to let you and Terry run with it. But I'll be here in the background and just kind of keep on top of things as we go along.
No problem.
All right, hon. Have a great show.
Thank you very much. So I guess I'm going to start off with giving a little bit of brief history about myself and how I came to understand all this. No one ever taught me about human rights and fundamental freedoms. Just like most of my viewers, I was unaware of the fact that I had something, or that there was something that was called human rights and fundamental freedoms. And excuse me, but I'm also getting a feedback on my line, so just to let you know. Okay.
Yeah, I'm getting an echo too there, John.
Okay, well, we'll work with it. As I said, it's our first time, so we'll just work with this. So I was taught, I started to do some research, and I saw that there was something called Free Man Movement here in Canada. And in this Free Man Movement, they were teaching us that a human being or a man and a woman were not the same as a person or a Canadian citizen. And I started to study this, and I saw that they were teaching us there was a distinction in law, and all the laws that were being applied against men and women they didn't really have the right to be doing this. So my next question was exactly, how are they doing this to me? How are they making me pay taxes? How are they making me obey their rules and regulations? And I saw it was because they had designated me, or they had titled me a person in law and not a human being, not a man. And this was my first, if you will say, awakening to the fact that there was two different operations in law going on in the country. One operation of law that we know of as common law was a branch of law that was permitting me to be free. And the second branch of law, it was statutes and regulations, and these were the rules or the regulations that they were using to bind me up and to control my life. Is that how you began to understand also, Terry?
Yes, that's exactly the same way I began to understand.
Okay, so now the implication of that upon me was to say, hang on a second here. How is it possible that there are two different designations in law? And if this is true, how is this affecting my life? So I took some time to look into the law and to study the law and to see what the law was saying. And sure enough, just as the freemen of Canada were declaring, there was a designation called a person in law. And that person was something that has been attached to me, and it wasn't me myself. So here in law, when they were trying to tell me that I had an obligation to pay taxes, or I had an obligation to have a license, or I had to follow their rules and regulations, it wasn't really laws that were applying to me as a man, but it was laws that they were applying to a person.
Yeah, John?
Yes?
I'll be trying to call back in because I'm getting a lot of feedback, okay? So you continue.
Okay. So after about a year of study, I finally understood that in law, there was a difference between a human being and a person. So then I said to myself, okay, well, how does that affect me personally? So I started to read and study, and I saw that a human being was free and had the capacity to remain free. And I had to admit and say, well, hang on a second, I'm not free. How is it possible that in law, a human being or a man and woman has the ability or the attribute to be free, but yet when I look at my own life, there's no freedom available. So then I got drawn, if you will, my attention to a law that said that every human being possesses a juridical personality, a legal person. And I said, this is saying to me that I, as a human being, am possessing a person. Or I could operate, or I could take recognition as a person before law. And if I did so, this would change my, if you will, standing before the government. So if anyone listening is familiar with my videos and my sharing, you will know about what I'm about to say. Human rights and fundamental freedoms, they operate apart from any control of any individual state or country. Before there was any, if you will say, Canada or America in operation, there was recognition concerning human rights and fundamental freedoms. And this recognition was transferred, if you will, or came out into our laws, into our domestic laws. So when United States of America or Canada created domestic laws and tried to apply laws upon the people or upon the human beings on their territory, these laws that they were yoking upon people were not human rights and fundamental freedoms. These were laws that were created by the government, by a commercial system, in order to control the people. And not to grant freedom. So it's pretty easy to understand. When you look at yourself and you say that you're a human being or a man, that is a designation that you can stand under. However, when the government looks at you or deals with you, they don't see you as a human being or as a man. They see you only as a person. Now, a person is a being that is artificially created by law, by words, and it's given certain rights and duties of a human being, but it's not a human being. So anytime you call yourself person, or you label yourself person, or you take the designation person, what you are declaring is that you are a legal entity, or you are taking recognition as a legal entity, and this entity has been created by the government. So there is two capacities. Once again, what we're trying to bring forth is that you have the capacity to remain as a human being, as a man, or you have the capacity to enter into recognition as a person. Now, each of these capacities, each of these designations, they have different roles, rights, and duties attached to them. For example, here in Canada, a Canadian citizen is under obligation to take an oath, to take a pledge of allegiance. And we have to swear an oath, a Canadian citizen has to swear an oath to Her Majesty, the Queen of Canada. By doing that, you take away your attribute of being free. So if a human being or a man has the right to be free, but yet as a citizen of a country, you're being brought into subjection through an oath, then you see that there's two different operations in law. One can be free, and one is forced into servitude. Now, we're supposed to have a choice. Law, they don't just sit down and make laws out of the blue. Like, they don't just come together, sit on the table, and decide, well, let's just make any laws out of the blue. There is something that's called international covenants. These are international obligations that a lot of the countries of the world are forced to follow or are forced to recognize. And when a country like Canada or United States went about making domestic law, like their local laws, they were under obligation to follow the structure of these international laws. Now, these international laws, they were created with the foremost importance, or if you will say, with the idea of expressing human rights and fundamental freedoms, and not commercial rights and freedoms. What's happened in our domestic countries is they've taken over the law and they've used law to for commercial purposes, to make the richer, to make the 1% richer. Instead of enforcing human rights and fundamental freedoms in our domestic laws, they went about and hid it. And they erected, or they focused more on commercial law instead. Now, these international laws are an expression, a clear expression of human rights and fundamental freedoms, and it creates an obligation upon all subsequent countries, like America and Canada, to fulfill these obligations. So, we can give a list of what human rights and fundamental freedoms are. If you look, there's something called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Freedoms, and there's an article of law in there, Article 6. And it states this, it says, everyone has the right to take recognition as a person before the law. Now notice the player there, it says everyone. So everyone, you, me, everyone, we have a right. It doesn't mean we have to use this right. It doesn't mean we have an obligation. But we can take recognition as a legal person before the law. That's our right. And this expression of law also comes out in something called the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 16. It states that everyone has the right to recognition as a person before the law. So you as a human being, me as a human being, as a man and woman, we have a right we can express, and that is we can take recognition as a person, as a citizen, as a subject of our state. But we don't have the obligation. And that human right and fundamental freedom of not having to have the obligation to enter into the recognition of a person, it overrides everything else. It's a fundamental right. It's something that is the most prime responsibility or the most prime right that you can express. Now, our individual countries like Canada and America, they can't control human beings. Even back in the day when people used to have slaves, you only used to have a slave because you had more power than the slave. You had the whip, or you had the taskmaster, you had the weapons, and you could force that human being into slavery. Nowadays, they don't really force us into slavery from the side of human being, but they force us into slavery. They force us to obey their laws by designating us, by titling us a person in law. Now, when you as a human being have the right to decide if you're going to be recognized as a person, your state party, your country doesn't want to give you that right. They want to automatically designate you as a person and therefore their subject that they can control. However, when you look into international law, you see that as a human being, you have a right that you can exercise, which is that you cannot force me to take recognition as a person before law. And this is a very important point. Because as I tried to explain in the beginning, which you guys, I hope you understood, but I was having a lot of feedback, and I still am, there's two different designations in law. There's a human being, a man or a woman, and there's that person, that artificial person that's been created by law. And you, as the human being, you don't have the obligation to take recognition as that person. And to start to exercise your human rights and freedoms, it starts with you understanding that this option is available to you. Now, they've never taught you this right. They've never allowed you to understand that there is something called entering into recognition as a person. And by doing so, you're giving up certain human rights and freedoms that you have. So when we in here in Canada state that we're a Canadian citizen, or when someone in America states that they're an American citizen, what they're saying is that they're part of and they're serving a commercial system as a person. And they're not standing as a human being.
Hello?
Yes, you're online.
Oh, sorry, I had a problem. My mute button was on by accident.
It's okay. I'm having many problems too for my first show. So welcome to the problem-filled show. We'll get through it.
So I guess I'll introduce myself. My name is Sergio, and I live in Quebec, Canada. I was led towards John's information when I had started researching a bit about the free man movement and everything, I just it was curious, to try and figure out what was going on here. They were bringing a lot of interesting points, such as the difference between the legal person and the human being. So I decided to start digging, and sooner rather than later, I found John's website, and I suggest that everyone goes on there and check it out. It's Eternally Aware. That's the name of the channel on YouTube, and he has about 160 videos that tremendously helped me out. He has a very good way of teaching and explaining this in a visual manner, where he deconstructs these laws, acts, and regulations and breaks it down word by word. That's the only true way we'll get to understanding all of this, because they have a very convoluted way of writing things.
Yes,
legalese is not an easy language to understand, but once you start realizing that the law can't be subject to interpretation, they really have to define the words that they're using. And once you understand the definition of these words, it sheds a whole new light on something that opens a door to thousands of possibilities. Like now that we have the ability to exercise human rights, it could be a wonderful thing.
How can you exercise something that you've never known existed?
Well, that's the thing. That's where a lot of study is involved in. And on an individual basis, it's not impossible. It's anyone can do it. It just takes time. And
when you learned about your human rights, did you see that you understood that Canada and America had an obligation to have taught you concerning your human rights, but they never did? Why do you think that is? Why don't they teach us as individuals what our human rights and fundamental freedoms are?
Well, that's the thing. As legal persons, when we assume that designation, they have control over us. They write all kinds of acts and regulations. They write bills into law, and they're more often than not, they're applicable to these legal persons. Like if you look at the Quebec Highway Safety Code or the various motor vehicle acts here in Canada, and same goes for the States. You have your motor vehicle acts as well. They're applicable to legal persons. Now,
why not just make a law then? I understand what you're saying, but why not just make a law that says, okay, well, the human being is obligated? Why did they have to go and make this person, create this person, this artificial person, and attach it to us as human beings?
Well, that's the thing. If they were able to control a human being in law, then technically they'd be legalizing slavery. They'd be removing our fundamental human rights. And it's clearly expressed in these international documents that we have a right to be free. We have a right to be free. And the next question is how do you attain that freedom? How do you go about exercising your human rights and freedoms? Because now we're stuck in a situation where we have not known any of this, and now all of a sudden we're open to a whole new world of possibilities and freedoms that we can stand under. And there is a process in which we can reclaim our rights.
Yes.
And I guess I'll let you talk a little bit about that, like the whole claim of right. And
no, go ahead. That's fine. You see, right now you're talking to someone, as Sergio explained, who came across. I met him about a year and a half ago, and he was looking to exercise his rights and freedoms, but he had never been taught his human rights and freedoms neither.
Hello?
Hi, Terry.
Oh, I'm back on. That's wonderful. Hi, Sergio. How are you?
Not too bad. Yourself?
Good, thank you. Go ahead. You're doing a great job there, buddy.
Thank you. So like I was saying before, it's a matter of reclaiming your rights. They had international obligations. They meaning, let's say, we'll take Canada for example, but the United States as well. And for that matter, every member state of the United Nations that signed on to these covenants.
On these covenants, you have something that's called a signatory, a party to these covenants. And these covenants are contractual binding upon the state party. So whoever signed into these covenants, whatever country signed into these covenants, there's a legal obligation upon them to fulfill the rights and freedoms that are enumerated or are contained in the covenants.
Exactly.
Go ahead, Serge.
And as they had an obligation to express to the citizens of their country the exercise of these human rights and fundamental freedoms, they had to include it in a constitutional process. Now, they had to mention it in their founding document and kind of leave us an article of law that allows us to express this. And if you look into the United States Constitution, Article 9, it says, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights, it's qualifying certain rights, Now, notice how there's only so many articles in the American Constitution. It doesn't list all our human rights. It just lists certain rights. Now, it goes on to say that the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So in this article of law, it's telling us that there are other rights that exist but are not enumerated in the Constitution, and that this Constitution, which is the supreme law in the United States, the founding document,
yes,
it cannot limit any other human rights and freedoms. And then the next question is, well, where do we find these human rights and freedoms? And the international covenants would be a very good place to start, because there's a lot of them that are enumerated in there that we do not see anywhere else in domestic legislation.
What Sergio just spoke about is absolutely the truth. In every country that is a signatory to these covenants, you're going to find in their domestic laws, you're going to find a qualification, as Sergio just explains, where it's going to say that we are offering you certain rights and freedoms. And these rights and freedoms that are enumerated here are yours to use. But there are other rights and freedoms available to you that are not indicated in this list. And that's what he's saying, that each country has this operational law available to it.
And then the question is, well, how do we invoke these articles of law? How do we choose not to be recognized as a person? How can we stand before our government or contact our government and let them know that we can express these rights and freedoms?
Well, there's an international law that says that everyone has the right to take recognition. So you can take recognition as a person, but you have no obligation. So your first and if you will say your foundational move on that is to claim your right as a human being, and to say, listen, I'm not going to take recognition as that person. I'm going to remain in a designated state of a human being, of a man and woman, and I refuse to take recognition of that person. And that's actually a human right that you have. That's a right and freedom that you have the authority to operate under legally.
Now, is that through a claim of right, John, that one would do that?
Through a claim of recognition, yeah.
Now, here in Canada, the way we can go about doing that, or the way people have gone about doing that here, is by notifying the people that claim to be the ones governing us. Because if we never stand up and voice our will to be free, they will just continue to assume that you're agreeing with the present system. You're agreeing to being recognized as a legal person. And they have an obligation, the state has an obligation to respond to citizens, to individuals that they claim to govern. So when you contact the government, whether it be your municipality or on a provincial or state level or on a federal level, they have an obligation to respond to you. And we can actually enter into contract with these branches of government. There's multiple ways where consent to a contract can be achieved. There can be the express will of the parties, meaning that both parties to the contract can either expressly agree or disagree to the terms of a contract. Now, in certain cases where you draw up a contract, let's say, and you want to submit it to the government, and the other party has an obligation to respond, as they do because they claim to govern us, we can obtain something called tacit consent. Now, tacit consent is where they admit by not denying. So you give them an opportunity to refute the claim that you're bringing before them, and give them a certain time frame. Say, look, you have 30 days to respond to this claim and to contest any of my claims herein under penalty of perjury. So they can't lie to you. They're obligated to tell the truth, and if they're going to refute any of your claims, now I'm not saying that you can claim something ridiculous.
I was just going to say that, Sergio. Anybody can claim anything, right?
Exactly. You know,
you can make up a documentation and you can claim anything you want to claim, but it doesn't mean that they're going to recognize your claim. As Sergio was stating, your human rights and fundamental freedoms are clearly enumerated and expressed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Freedoms and in the international covenants. And those articles of law that expresses your human rights and freedoms, those are the articles of law that you need to call on.
Absolutely. And once we start realizing what our human rights are, it's a pretty big list. You know, it's a shocking thing to understand that we have a right to life, we have
Yes.
a right to water, we have a right to clothing, education,
Well,
housing.
speaking about that, speaking about what you just said there, Sergio, most people don't know that within the international laws, international covenants, one of the human rights that we have is just what you said. We as human beings, we have the right to food, we have the right to water. They recognize we have the right to housing, we have the right to clothing, and we have the right to the continued improvement of our living condition year after year. That's a fundamental human right that is available for you to stand under and operate under. However, a person, a Canadian citizen or American citizen, he doesn't have those rights. He doesn't have those attached to him. What he has is a welfare system. What he has is an unemployment system to support them. Now, those are two very different, if you will say, operations of law that are available to you. One is where there's an obligation upon America or Canada as a state party to fulfill your human rights, to make sure you as a human being have enough food, have enough water, have enough clothing, have a home to live in, and that your living condition is improving. Now, those are your guaranteed rights, but they don't want to respect them. So they designate you a person, they render you a person in law, and therefore they don't have any more obligation to fulfill those rights for you.
So, John, I wanted to ask you a question. How can people go about enforcing those rights for themselves? What are the steps?
The first step in order to enforce these rights are to make a claim for recognition, or what we know as sort of to be a claim of right. That's what we're saying. You have to first. You can't claim something that you don't understand or know that it exists. So your first step is to study the law, or do what Sergio said. Go to eternallyaware.com or Eternally Aware at YouTube and start seeing what these covenants say and what they offer to you as a human being. Once you start to become familiar with the laws and how they apply to you personally as a man or woman, then you can start to express them on a documentation. You can start writing them down. Once you got a clear expression down and you've claimed some rights, then you need to start to notify the government, the ones that are sitting in authority or in de facto position of government, and let them know, listen, you have a contractual obligation. You're a state party to these international articles of law, and you haven't fulfilled them on my behalf. Now I'm letting you know that you failed to fulfill them on my behalf. Therefore, I'm going to hold you accountable to them. And it starts by documenting or claiming your right through a claim for recognition.
Exactly.
Then what would be the next step after that?
The next step is what Sergio was talking about. Once you send your claim for recognition out, you can use several operations of law. You can get a tacit agreement, which means you can have them agree with you by they never respond to you, by using that operation of law. But you're not under obligation, because like we say, these articles of law, first of all, they're internationally recognized, they're domestically recognized, and they create a legal obligation upon Canada or upon the United States of America to make sure they're fulfilled. So once you've got your claim of recognition done, you can easily walk into a court of law, into the higher courts of where your land is, and start to make demands on them and say, there's an obligation upon you, a legal obligation, to make sure my rights and freedoms are respected, and you are failing to do it. Now, do the courts want to hear it? Of course not. If they went through all this effort to hide our rights and freedoms by designating us a person and hiding our rights in the law, it's for sure that when you figure all this out and confront them, they're not going to be happy. Does it change the fact that they have an obligation? No. Does it change the fact that there's a measure or a way that has been placed or put into operation to fulfill these needs for you? No, it's there. But it's a war. It's a battle.
Yeah, that I agree with. It's a hell of a battle. And I guess
we have someone else on hold. Serge, we have someone else on hold, so we're going to bring him in on the conversation and see what he has to say.
Okay, perfect.
You stay on. Hello, caller. Caller.
Hello? It could be there's a problem with the microphone because I hear something on the other end, but just not a voice.
Hello? Caller, we're speaking to you. The one that was on hold. Can you hear me?
They're probably muted, John.
No, I have their mic on.
No, on their end.
661 area code. Can you hear me?
Is there another caller on hold?
Well, we tried.
Maybe they don't want to speak, John.
So, when you look into the international laws, okay, we're going to talk about another human right. Do you know that the international law, it says that a human being has the following right? They have the right to enjoy a living. They have the right to enjoy their social, economic, and cultural rights. Do you know what that means? Because a person, in the same law, it states that a person has to pursue after these same rights and freedoms.
It's interesting to note the distinction that they're making in that in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. On one hand, the human being has the right to enjoy a living, and the legal person has a right to pursue a living. And therein lies the clear difference, because the pursuit of a living means you have to go out and you have to pay for it. You have to pay for your house. You have to pay for your water, your clothing, your education. Whereas the enjoyment of something, when you enjoy something, you don't have to pay for it. It's there for you to exercise. And
they did put it in there. They just did it very well.
Exactly. And like people would ask, well, how is it possible that we can enjoy all these rights? How is it possible that everyone here in Canada, let's say, would be able to enjoy housing or to enjoy education? Like, is all of this free? How is it that there's so many of these rights and we don't have to pay for any of them? Like, what system is there in place for us to fulfill these obligations?
The security of the person, the patrimony of the man.
Exactly. And there's,
you see, the way it works is that the state party, well, I'm going to just explain it a little bit in Canada, and it's sort of the same in other countries. But the Queen, or if you will say the Crown, the monarchy, they seized the land. They said that God gave them the permission to seize the land, and that all the minerals and all the wealth of the land belong to them, and that they're going to distribute it on behalf of us common people. And the massive amount of wealth that rests within the land is incredible. It can take care of all of our needs. When Sergio's talking about the fact that people don't understand, well, how is it possible that we have these fundamental rights and how can they pay for all this? Money is just a created illusion, but we won't get into all of that. But if you look at the budget of the government, they spend ridiculous amounts of money to support a government system and a little bit of money to support their people, their social systems. And I have a video that teaches about that, just exactly what Canada is doing with their income.
Exactly. They've been dipping into this public fund, and it's been going to feed the fat cats. The rich are getting richer, and the poor are getting poorer. There's a growing disparity of wealth that's occurring around the world. We're teetering on the edge of a huge global recession. Like, what's causing all of this? What's happening? What are they doing with our money? Where is it going?
Well, you see, if someone has if you have a human right and freedom, which you do, and one of those human rights and freedoms, as we expressed before, was the right to housing, or the right to food, or the right to clothing. Now, to fulfill those needs, to have those needs met, it's obviously going to take a monetary instrument, right?
Exactly.
Because in order for us to have access to housing or clothing or food, we have to pay money, no matter who you are. I can't just walk into the store and say, well, give me it and it's mine. No. So somehow, some way, there has to be a monetary instrument available to all of us, each individual, each human being, to fulfill the obligation that the state party has. Now, when you look in Quebec law, it's very clear here in Quebec. Article 2 of the Quebec Civil Code, it states that every person has a patrimony, and that patrimony can be divided or appropriated for a specific purpose. Now, a patrimony is a security. A patrimony is a security that is there on your behalf. Now, that patrimony is what's supposed to support your human rights and freedoms. But what they do is they seize your patrimony. They take control of your patrimony, and they take the funds that are there for you as a human being to meet your needs, and they appropriate it into the public system. They take the money and they put it into the public system.
Yep, exactly. And here in Canada, it's held in something called the Consolidated Revenue Fund. That's a pool of public funds where all the patrimonies are being appropriated towards.
Yes. All our individual patrimonies are appropriated into what Sergio just said. It's called the Consolidated Revenue Fund, and the government is the ones that dip into this consolidated fund. So when they need to pay a government department, they dip into it. When they need to pay another bill, they dip into it. But when you want your fundamental human rights and freedoms met, they're not using that money for that reason.
And it's interesting how they have done it here in Quebec. This has all started through the registration of births. When your parents gave birth to you, you were issued a act of live birth, and that was the evidence of your mother and father bringing in a human being into this world. And what happened subsequent to that was that they registered you. Your parents registered the newborn child with the state. And on that security, on that birth certificate, it states here in Quebec that we have a constructive registered holder. And he's acting on our behalf because we're titled children. And a child has no right to exercise these funds. It's just like if your parents were to set up a trust fund for you in an amount of $1 million and just leave it there in a bank account and say you can't touch it until you're 18 years old. Well, if you're 17 years old, you can't really dip into that account. But this is what the state has done. They've declared us children, and they've never removed that designation from us or modified or changed that designation.
Very good.
If you're 80 years old here in Quebec and you ask for a copy of your birth certificate, it still declares you as a child on that certificate. Having reached the age of 80 years old, though, you would ask yourself the question, well, having lived my full life, I don't think I'm a child anymore.
Now, the reason why they're doing that is just exactly what Sergio was saying, that when you're born as a human being, okay? And what they do is they seize hold upon that patrimony. They seize hold upon that money that's supposed to be used to meet your human rights and fundamental freedoms, and they say, well, you're a child, so you can't exercise any rights upon, you can't spend this money, you don't know how to use this money. So as a government agent, we're going to take control of it. And they're supposed to have the obligation. Now notice that. They become the constructive registered holder, but that title, that designation produces obligations and responsibilities and duties behind that title. And one of them is they're under obligation to meet your human rights and fundamental freedoms. But what that office does is, subsequent to that act of birth, they then create that legal person and attach that legal person to you. And that legal person doesn't have any fundamental human rights and freedoms. And now that money that was supposed to be used for you is going to be used to support that legal person. So let's say they need to put a little bit of that patrimony into the welfare system. They need to put a little bit of that patrimony into another system. But they never use it to support your fundamental freedoms or rights anymore.
John, we have a caller.
Okay.
Area code 661. The mic is open.
Hello, caller.
Can we make the mic hot?
Hello, caller.
It's open, caller. Hello. Your mic is hot.
Your mic is hot, caller.
I'm guessing there's an issue on his end.
Yep.
No, might be a troll.
Going twice. Sold.
I guess we'll have to wait for... maybe if he tries calling back in, would that work?
Well, he could try if he wants to talk, Sergio, but I think this is twice now.
Yeah, that's twice now, huh?
Yeah, so...
Well, I guess we'll continue on.
So the government actually, on these patrimonies, when you do a research, you find this all in the Canadian Bank Act, but when you do a research, you find that the government is actually collecting dividends quarterly. So every 4 months, the government is collecting on your patrimony dividends, hundreds of thousands of dollars, that is there for your need, that is there for you to use. And they take that money and they deposit it into the Consolidated Revenue Fund. Why? Because they still declare you to be a child. And as you being declared to be a child, you cannot exercise any rights on your security. So your step in order to get your rights to your security is to break the constructive registered holder on that account. Now, as Sergio was saying, they're declaring you to be a minor, a child. And when you look in the Bank Act, it states that if you are a minor or a child, you can't control your own security. So you have to prove to them that you are no longer a minor, that you are no longer a child. And that's the first step in devolving the operation of law back to you so you can control or have access to your own patrimony.
And that's when the battle begins.
Oh, that's for sure. Because they don't want you to have access to that patrimony. Because they're fine using all that money. Anybody, I mean, it's sad to say that we're like this in this generation, but anybody who can have access to free money, hey, great. But this is not free money to say to use to go buy a Porsche and to go buy diamond rings or the like. This is to meet your fundamental rights and freedoms, your human rights and needs, such as clothing, food, housing.
Here in Canada, there should be no reason why we have homeless people on the streets.
Not at all. Each and every single one of these homeless people have a patrimony that backs them up. Each and every one of these human beings that are living on the street, that are suffering, that are dying because the government is stealing their money, they are backed by these bonds. They are backed by these patrimonies to secure their human rights and freedoms, but the government agent has seized upon their security and is using it in other ways instead of supporting that human being. But it doesn't matter because it's not a human being. It's a person. It's a Canadian citizen.
Yeah, and if the call, well, not the callers, but if the listeners would like to go on John's website, he released a video about 6 months ago, kind of explaining where some of this money out of the public fund, where they're appropriating this money, what it's actually going towards, and there's some gross expenditures coming out of that account that are going to pay for things like the Queen's birthday. She had her Diamond Jubilee, and there was $7 million that was dispersed out of the Consolidated Revenue Fund to pay for the Queen's birthday. That's one day, $7 million. And there's people sleeping on the street.
And they also spend over $35 million a year testing horses that run on racetracks to make sure they're not taking drugs.
This is how ridiculous it's gotten. They've tapped into these public funds, they've stolen our wealth, and this is what they're spending it on. It's very, very sad.
And this wealth, again, is meant to support us, the human beings, our rights and our needs. There
was a 12-year-old about a year or two ago. Her name was Victoria Grant. She was from British Columbia, and she did a little speech about the financial state of Canada. That was amazing. Like,
that was
if a 12-year-old can understand it, it's like, why can't the rest of us?
That was great. She did really well there.
And she was right on the money when she said that we're spending here in Canada $160 million a day to pay for interest on a debt created by private central banks. Because here in Canada, we're loaning money into existence from private banks, and we're paying at a cost of interest at $160 million a day. Now, think of what we can do with that money here in Canada to support and to help out the human beings that are living here. We can dramatically change the living situation here in Canada within a generation.
Well, Canada had an obligation to teach us, each individual here on their territory, of our rights and freedoms. And do you know how much money Canada spends every year to teach us of our rights and freedoms? $3 million.
Yeah, $3 million. They spend over twice as much in one day for the Queen's birthday, and they spend $3 million a year for the rest of us.
Why? It goes on to the fact is because they want to keep these fundamental rights and freedoms hidden from you. Because again, if you don't know they're in existence, how can you claim for them? You can't lay a claim upon something that you don't know is there for you.
Which is why I really commend the work that you're doing, John. Honestly, all the information that you've put out in the last year, it just shines a huge light on this whole situation. And sooner or later, this information is going to get out. The advent of the internet we're living in an amazing time where information can be transferred in real time across the globe. And we all have that information at our fingertips. It's just a matter of looking for it, searching for it.
So let's talk about another human right that we have, another right that is available for us to exercise and stand under, and that's the right of association.
John, before we do that, I have a Skype question from America. They want to know if this applies to them as well, because they're under the impression that the Constitution was the contract with the ones who signed it, was not the people were not a party to it. So they want to know if this applies to them as well.
Okay. America is a signatory to these international covenants. America is under obligation to fulfill the human rights and freedoms that are expressed in the international covenants. Therefore, they are legally bound to you as an individual, as one human being, as a man or a woman. They are bound to fulfill your rights and freedoms that you find expressed in the international covenants.
And they have successfully fulfilled that obligation, although they've done it very deceptively, in
Yes.
Article 9 of the Constitution. That is the article of law which we can draw upon, or which American citizens can draw upon, to have access to all the other rights which aren't enumerated in the Constitution. That article of law that was put there to basically fulfill that international obligation, to express the fact that we can stand under those rights if we so choose.
Yeah, you see, in the what Sergio is talking about in Article 9, it states that there are other rights and freedoms that are not listed in the Declaration itself. And these other rights and freedoms that are not listed in the Declaration themselves, it is recognized. They are recognized by America. Now, you have to go and find out where are these rights and freedoms that they're talking about. Okay, there's other rights and freedoms that are recognized. That's not in the Declaration. Well, where are they? Well, they are in the international covenants. That's where you're going to find them. And again, these international covenants, they bind America.
Yep, and I suggest to all the listeners to go and check this out. If you just go on Google and type in International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, as well as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, those three documents would be a very good place to start in learning where your rights are, where they lie, and what they are.
Yes, it is crucial. It is actually mandatory that you go and read those documents. Or you can visit my website and you can listen to videos that I've placed out there that's going to show you the expression of human rights and freedoms and how they are applicable to you, and they are applicable to America. Now, the only difference between America and Canada is the justice system, the court systems.
Here in Canada, it's very different than it is in the United States, because we all know with the implementation of the NDAA, they've gone to great lengths to kind of tear up the Constitution, so to speak. So
yes.
I guess my question to you, John, is if you're in America, in a country where they're basically putting this thing in the shredder, how can we invoke this, and how can we use this to produce a change in our lives if they're just constantly, on a daily basis, trampling over the rights of American citizens?
Very, very good question. It's funny to see, because even in Canada, when you look into the regulations and into the laws, you're going to find in certain enactments that deal with emergency situations, okay, that deal with situations out of the normal circumstances. And within these emergency situations, it states that the rights and freedoms that are recognized in these international covenants, they can never be removed, even in a time of emergency. And that same guarantee that is expressed in Canada is guaranteed in America also. So even though they're trying to make that terrorism bill, for example, that they passed in America, where, you know, if you speak out or whatever, they have the right to come and arrest you and hold you indefinitely and all that. No, they can't. If you call on your international rights as a human being, these rules subside or supersede these terrorism acts and these bills that they are trying to pass upon people.
Absolutely. And like I said, there's a notification process that we have to engage in. That's like getting your foot in the door. That's what we have to do. We have to start letting the government know that.
Sergio, from your own experience, though, you're absolutely right. But from your own experience, before you ever even consider notifying any government agent or any national body, domestic or international, what's important? That you understand that what you're sending, that what you're going to notify them is what you understand, not something that you've copied and pasted.
Exactly. There's a lot of these templates out there. And when I first started looking up this information, I found like dozens of claim of right templates out there, and a lot of them had some good information. But at the end of the day, if you're just going to copy paste something about your rights, you know, it's imagine being the government employee or the government department where all these things are going towards, and they're seeing the same template over and over and over again. They'll just figure, okay, well, these people don't know anything, and it doesn't change from the system standpoint of what they're going to do to us, because they're like, okay, well, they're just going to be copying a template, so they don't really understand what's going on. We'll step on them anyways, and we'll see what happens. and they've weeded out a lot of those people, a lot of those copycats using that process. Sad to say, because it's harmed a lot of individuals and human beings in the process. There's a lot of us out there that are just trying to find an answer, trying to find a solution to all of this, and it's only by a lot of study and by drafting a claim of right that comes from yourself, that comes from your own understanding, will of change actually be produced in your life.
John, I have another question that came in through Skype.
Okay.
Why do we have to claim our rights when the government is in de facto possession of the sovereign power?
Okay. Well, go ahead, Serge.
I'll let you answer that one.
Okay.
You know more about the de facto power.
A de facto power is operating power. They're operating the office on behalf of, let's say, the crown or on behalf of Her Majesty. Now, these rights are still recognized, okay? If you don't claim them, if you don't bring them before the de facto power and say you have an obligation because your power is stemming from the original power. So the same obligation that the original power have, it rests upon you. When you say de facto power, that de facto power, even though the office is illegal, because that's what de facto means, the office has been granted.
Yeah, we can't argue that it's de facto. Like in a court of law, they'll never hear that argument. Like,
no.
Yeah, they'll just kick you out of the courtroom or whatever. They'll have your way with you. But the one thing they can't deny is your human rights once you've claimed them.
No. That's the one thing they can't do. If you got a properly cured documentation where you've exercised your human rights and freedoms that are in the international codes, international covenants, and you bring that into a court of law, a domestic court of law, it's pretty hard for them to close their eyes.
Exactly. And just how I was explaining before that there's multiple ways to obtain consent, and in the situation of the government, we'd have to obtain a tacit consent to this agreement, meaning that through their non-response, they're agreeing with our claims. The government has done the same thing to us. Like they've declared us citizens, and we've never said anything else. We've never said, well, I'd like to be a human being and stand under the rights that are afforded to a human being. And it's only through voicing that it can be achieved, which is why we have to claim our rights. Because right now, the government's impression is that we're legal persons. We haven't said otherwise.
Yes.
I hope that answers the question.
I'm hoping it answers their question, too.
Are there any other questions?
Well, I'm getting a lot of them flying in here, so I wish they would call in the show, but...
There's somebody else seems that they're on hold called Responsible.
Okay, maybe...
I'm going to bring someone on the line called Responsible.
Sounds good.
Hello? Responsible?
Hello?
Hello? Your mic is hot. Responsible?
I'm trying. Just 1 minute.
Oh, no problem. We can hear you fine.
Oh, yeah, okay. All right, so you hear me well?
Yes, nice to meet you.
Me too. I was just wondering, I live in Quebec too, so I wanted to keep in touch with Sergio, if it's that possible.
I'm pretty sure I can send an email. Well, I'll send out my email after the show. And do you have this caller's email by any chance, John? Or
no, but Terry or somebody will get it.
Okay, we'll forward you the information.
Okay.
Well, maybe he can put the email in the Freedom Reigns book. Yes.
Okay, give me 1 second. So that was it. I don't want to make you waste your time. So.
Oh, that's never a waste of time.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Are you, sir?
Yes.
Are you an agent of the government?
No.
John.
Take care of yourself.
Take care.
All right.
Hey,
You never know.
Sergio.
Yes.
I got a Skype message here. Have Sergio wear his headset. Do you have a headset on?
Yes, I do. Well,
okay.
I'm talking through the microphone of my laptop. You're gonna have to excuse me. I have headphones, so at least I won't get feedback on my end. But I have to deal with the microphone of my laptop. I hope it's not too bad.
I just have constantly feedback. I have so much trouble to hear anything. So.
Oh, really? It sounds great on my end now.
Same here. I just hope the callers can make it out clear.
Yeah, I must have sounded really bad in the beginning because I couldn't really hear anything.
Okay, that's good. That's better. I just got a Skype message saying it was lots of feedback. Now it's better. So.
Okay, perfect. It could be my connection. I'm up here in the woods, so sometimes it slows down a bit.
Okay, another Skype question here, John. What happens during war or a collapse and our rights are respected? What happens then? What would they do then?
That's the beautiful thing about this. As I began to study and learn more and more about my human rights and fundamental freedoms, I saw that during wartime, most people are afraid that the UN is going to come in and they're going to be destructive or kill us or kill our citizens and stuff like that. When you have a claim of recognition in play, these are international laws. Listen to that, international laws. And this body, the UN, is an international body. So they themselves are under obligation to respect those international laws. Am I going to say it's going to be easy? I can't, how can you say, predict exactly what would happen? But I mean, the commander of those units or whoever's going to be leading those units are going to be well aware of the international obligations that rest upon them.
I guess we can move on to the next question.
I'll see here. Anybody on the call, John, for any more questions?
I think Responsible is still holding on, it seems.
Maybe he has another question?
Okay, I wanted to get into the fact of the human right about association, because everybody, all human beings have the right of association. You can associate with who you want to associate. No one can force you into association. Now, for example, if you want to drive, or if you want to travel in a vehicle, you have to go and apply for a license. Now, here in Canada, that application of law comes out of the Financial Administration Act, Article 19.2. It talks about that a person has to apply for a license or a permit and has to pay fees, and the Queen, Her Majesty, will grant him the right, or her the right, the person the right, to exercise that. Now, if you as a human being have the right to association, how is it that it's possible that in order for you to travel, they are saying in your country, in the country, that you have to be in association with, for example, the Automobile Society?
Well, that's the beauty of it. We don't have to be in association with the government or with the Société d'Assurance Automobile de Québec, which is the society which controls driving here in our province.
Okay, you know that, Sergio. You know you don't have to be in association. And why can you say that? Where are you drawing that right from?
Oh, that's in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms here on a domestic level. Our Constitution Act.
And where is that being expressed? Why did it come into the domestic charter?
Well, because they were under international obligation to express the fact that we're free.
Very good. In the international covenants, it states that everyone has the right to freedom of association. And then the State Party Canada was under obligation to make sure that right, that freedom was expressed in their charter, and they did. So Absolutely. You have the right to freedom of association. Yet, they want to force you as a person to associate with the automobile societies. And they'll say, listen, you don't have the right to travel anywhere unless you're in association with the automobile societies. Well, do you see how that breaks your fundamental human right?
Yeah, absolutely. If, let's say, for instance, they were not to include, they wouldn't include our freedom of association in our constitutional documents. Technically, what they would be doing is legalizing slavery. Because if we don't have the freedom of association, then we can be bound to someone else's will. Exactly.
And they have to leave the article of law in there. Whether they want us to have the right or understand it or operate it, they have to leave it in there. Now, Sergio, you've learned, let's see how much you've learned over the past year there concerning houses and ownership over a house and association with that.
Well, I haven't gone into that much, but I'll try and answer to the best of my knowledge.
Okay, well, you know that a person is incorporated into the municipality, right?
Yes.
Okay, and when you're incorporated into a municipality, they become the administrators of your property.
Yes.
And they are holding your property in association with your municipality. And they actually have superior right of ownership to your house. And I like to express it like this. If you own your house, if you don't have a mortgage on your home, for example, and you don't pay your house taxes, after a period of 3 years, the city will come and kick you out of your own house. Even though you've paid $200,000 or $300,000 for that house, and you only owe them $5,000 or $6,000, they will still try to exercise rights that says, get out of here, the house now belongs to us. Now, they only have the right to do this because they're declaring in law that you as a person, your property is being held in association with the municipality. And the fact that it's being held in association with them, they have administrative rights over your property. Now, once again, that goes against your fundamental human right and freedom. That says that you don't have to be held in association with anything or anyone.
Not only that, we should have the right to our own private property.
Yes. Yes, you have a fundamental right of having the right to your own private property, but they don't want to let you express that, and they do it by incorporating your person into the municipality and then operating as administrator on your behalf, and only giving your legal person certain ownership rights.
Yeah, even though we can hold the equity in the house.
See, most people don't understand about rights or ownership rights. They think that when they own something, well, it just belongs to them and that's it. And that's not the case at all. The way property law has been set up, first of all, property law stripped us of most of our fundamental rights as a human being, and then it returned to us limited rights, limited ownership rights to property. And this property is being administrated. For example,
well, that's
go
why
ahead, Terry.
one is designated a tenant.
Yes, very good.
Yeah, but the thing is, in the notification process, which we call a claim of right, we can actually lay claim to our property, and it can be protected under that claim of right. That's one of the ways to protect yourself from foreclosure, let's say, for instance, because a human being's home is inviolable, cannot be violated.
Yes. A person's home, if you don't, let's say, for example, a person's home can be taken away from them by many operations of law. For example, if you had a mortgage and you didn't pay 3 or 4 months of that mortgage, the bank will start a process against you, take you to court, and remove the home from you. Another process of law, how they can remove the home from you. If you don't pay your house taxes for 3 years, the city can start a process against you and remove your home from you. Another process of law, let's say if you're doing illegal drug activity in your home and the police catch you, they can seize your home as criminal property, criminal funds, and you will lose your home. But a human being, he has the right, a fundamental right, that his home is inviolable. It cannot be defiled.
Yeah, because at that point, you have the government acting on statutes and regulations, whereas you'd be in a position where you're standing under something that's fundamental.
Yes.
Human rights constitute the foundation for freedom, justice, and peace in this world. So how can an act or a regulation that applies to a person that can only be enforced with association, the will of both parties, how can that override something that creates the foundation for justice and peace in the world?
It doesn't.
It can't.
It doesn't, but what they're hoping is that you don't know about that. They're hoping that you don't recognize and understand that human right and freedom, and that you don't know how to claim it. Because once you understand it and can claim it, then you have the right to stand under it, and it produces the liberty.
Is Terry back with us?
Yes, I'm back.
We're all back.
I have another question here on Skype for you, John, or Sergio. If our rights get respected, how does one eat and shop for clothes and food and stuff?
You go to the grocery store.
Exactly. But they want to know what is done after that, once they respect your rights.
You see, in the international covenants, it states that they have an obligation to fulfill your human rights as concerning food, clothing, housing, and the like. And don't forget a continued improvement of your living condition. Now, it states that they have to provide a measure or a way through legislative means. So basically, they have to have an enactment, some way, some operation of law present in the enactment in order to allow you to access this patrimony, or they have to make a measure apart from an enactment. So a private arrangement with the government ministers.
Yes.
Now they're wondering how do they go shopping? They say, do they pay for the food, or does the government pay for you for these things?
Now, well, you have to pay for it and ask for something that's called an appropriation.
you kind of get refunded.
You see, all money here in Canada, no matter what it is, even your patrimony has been seized and placed into the Consolidated Revenue Fund. Now, that Consolidated Revenue Fund is accessed in two ways, by a requisition or by an appropriation. A requisition is something that the government agents do. It's something that a person can do. An appropriation is something that we have the right to ask for on our behalf as a human being. And when we ask for an appropriation, we're tapping into our patrimony. We're tapping into that original amount of money that was there to meet our fundamental rights as human beings, but that was taken away from us and put into that public fund.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that there's enough information on this to actually fill an entire show just about how to go about gaining control of your patrimony. This is something you cannot simply answer in a sentence. You know, it's a lot of studying.
In future shows, we're going to deal about this for sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, John, you have the little clapping icon here, and repeat your website, please, because they would like to learn more.
It's eternallyaware.com. eternallyaware.com.
Great. Continue.
I just like to add a little comment to the previous person's question.
Mm-hmm.
Like John was stating before, on an individual level, you could have these funds disbursed to you through a private arrangement. So if you've gone that far and your claim of right has been recognized and you've severed the constructive registered hold over your patrimony and you've taken all the steps necessary in order to gain control of it, a private arrangement can be arranged.
And don't forget that anything that you do on behalf of your human rights and freedoms that you bring into a court of law, they have the ability to seize these files. They have the ability to make sure that it doesn't enter into public records so other people don't have jurisprudence, that you don't make a way for other people, that they have to find their own way, other human beings. And the same thing works when you look into the Financial Administration Act. The same thing works on behalf of appropriations. The minister that gets charged with making an appropriation, that gets the report and has to deal with this, he can destroy the records after. And he never has to have a trace of what has taken place. And like Serge said, we're going to talk about this more in future episodes.
Oh, good. You have another caller, apparently, area code 661, and their mic is hot if they have a comment or a question. Your mic is hot, 661, if you're there.
That's the same one that's been trying a few times.
Yeah, I just got another Skype from Diatra. The mic is hot if they have a comment or a question.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes?
Hello.
Hello.
Yes,
Go
we can
ahead,
hear you.
caller.
This is David.
Nice to meet you, David.
We
So
know
what's your
David.
question?
Oh, excellent. You guys can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you now. Perfect.
I was answering to the 661 because I'm a different area code than that.
Sergio, it's David from Toronto.
Oh, David,
Hi,
come on. How's it going,
David.
Dave?
Hi, everybody. I'm sorry, John. I have to claim differently on your claim of appropriation. It has to be an instruction for payment because when I sent in an instruction for payment, I got back a letter saying that they were going to take the appropriate action, which I believe that's when they severed the constructive hold. Then my next attempt, I'd actually made the title claim of appropriation, and then underneath that, I put the instruction for payment. Well, they returned a letter, and they said, we were responding to your correspondence claim of appropriation, not the instruction for payment. They're responding to the claim of appropriation. And it says here, we wish to inform you that you were asked by the department to respond to your initial request. Therefore, given the fact that your request has already been officially answered for, and on the behalf of cannot consider this matter closed. Now,
They changed the designation
my instruction.
from a claim of appropriation to claim for instruction of payment. That's what they're holding on.
See, but I sent an instruction for payment. Now, is it supposed to be two separate documents? Is one supposed to be a claim of appropriation as if it was a notice form, and then a separate document as an instruction for payment with, let's say, my rent receipt, and then also appended to it would be a notarized copy of my certified registration. Right? Now, you see, I've done all that with my very first one, where they said they broke the constructive hold by replying with, we're going to take the appropriate action. My mistake in that was that I asked them to send me a check. I think there needs to be a facilitator.
Yes, your bank account.
Correct. Now, I don't know if you guys have been watching my videos with the banks. They've been giving me a hard time, man. Right? They've been giving me a real hard time now, even just cashing my checks. I work for a union, and the money is basically guaranteed. There's a payroll corporation called ADP. So banks look at this, they see it's an ADP check, and they're like, good as gold. But I started challenging them, and I actually went in there, and I said, you got to wipe out all this information I provided you. Here is my statement of live birth. We're going to move forward from this document only.
Okay.
And as everybody else, you've always heard back in return that they rely upon policy. And so that's all they keep telling me is the policy. I keep referring back to the Bank Act and how it is actually designated as my security. And they treat me like I'm some sort of lunatic.
So what would you suggest in his situation, John?
He's going to have to file. He's going to have to file in either Superior Court in Ontario or back into a Supreme Court. And he's there. Well, he's got enough understanding. David has a better understanding than the majority of people that are operating in Canada right now.
I actually do have a successful my statement of claim was struck with lack of cause. The notary.
He's cutting out. David, you're cutting out, hon.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
That's a little better. Try again.
Okay, my computer went to sleep. I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, a little better.
Okay, well, anyways, it says here from the prothonotary.
David, you know what I can do for you about what you're talking about there? There's a woman named Deidre. You met her. She's come to one of our gatherings. She's been able to defeat the federal court from playing these games about trying to dismiss the cases. And she's gotten to be able to hold the pro-notary accountable for not signing the order. I can forward you her email, and you can talk to her about how she did it.
Oh, okay. That would be fantastic.
Instead of explaining it on air, because we only have about a half hour left, but she went through the same thing you went through, and when they tried to dismiss her case, she went against the pro-notary, and she was able to get her case into court. And so was another man here in Quebec, Stéphane.
Okay. Well, then, you know what? That's something really important to me. So if you could remember to send me her email, and if I could just quickly move over to another subject, just for a moment, so I can maybe put this in the consciousness of the people who are listening. John, you're aware that Canada has just, in fact, released its Universal Periodic Review here in Canada, right?
Yes, go, David.
And they'll be standing in front of Ireland, the Philippines, and Brazil, okay? And now I'm actually working with a bunch of different groups, the People's Peace Cause, and we're going to send notices to the envoys that basically in this report that Canada is sent, judged upon by these three countries, we're going to rebut every single statement with a bunch of different groups. Now, the People's Peace Party is a food trying to grow food for food awareness and then donate it back to at the end of donate it back to food banks.
We're losing you, David.
Yeah, Dave, we're losing you. David is trying to say that there's going to be a report that's going to be published for in 2013, April 22nd. Canada is going to be issuing a report for human rights and fundamental freedoms. And David wants us to contact the Commission and to give our opinion, to give our statements concerning how Canada's failing to promote human rights and fundamental freedoms here in Canada.
Well, I did in fact find out who we contact, and the places that we contact are. Just give me 1 second here because I bookmarked them. We want to look for the permanent mission from each of those 3 countries. That's where we would send our notices to the envoys at the permanent mission for the Philippines to the United Nations, Ireland to the United Nations, and the other countries, Brazil. So I think it's kind of important.
Oh, Dave, your phone is killing us here. We can hardly hear you anymore. Forward the information to my email, and next week we're going to be back on here on Sunday. Come on back on and try and come on a landline if you can.
Okay, I will.
All right, bro.
Well, I'm listening anyway, so I'm here till the end.
All right, take care.
Take care, Dave.
Take care, Dave. John?
Yeah, we have another caller now. Caller in the 862 area code.
Yes.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good, and yourself?
Yeah, I'm just. I'm fine. Well, I just jumped on here not too long ago. I really don't know what the topic of the show, but sounds pretty interesting. What you're talking about. It's just sort of
human
like
rights and fundamental freedoms.
Fundamental freedoms. Okay, dealing with human rights and all that. I heard you talk about Canada, but I live in the U.S. It's the same.
Oh yes,
issues.
it's applicable. Oh yes, it's applicable in the United States of America. Human rights and fundamental freedoms are applicable to everyone in all countries that are signatories to this, and even if not. But yeah.
Yeah, the only qualification you need to be able to exercise your human right is to be a human being.
A man or a woman.
Okay.
So as long as you're a human being, you're good to go.
Okay. Do I have some type of website or anything like as far as what do
I have a website. It's eternallyaware.com. Eternallyaware.com.
Eternallyaware.com.
Yeah.
You want to spell that out, John?
ETernallyAware.com.
I got you.
And this week there's going to be some more information concerning the United States of America that's going to be put up on the website for the American people or American humans.
Okay. All right. That's all the questions I had. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Take care.
You too.
John, I have another Skype question for you.
Okay.
Did John receive his appropriation and the other guy that's speaking with him, Sergio?
Well, thanks to me going ahead and showing all this stuff that I've been in the past year, I'm having a lot of trouble personally in my own life. I'm being forced now to go to court, Supreme Court of Canada, and fight again for my patrimony.
And on my behalf, I haven't really gone there yet. You have to understand that this is a long process, and there is a lot of study involved. But eventually, I will end up there. It's not. I got a lot on my plate right now with my situation. I have a claim against the Crown Corporation for my right to travel. That's the battle that I'm currently in right now. I've had my car impounded, and I'm trying to fight the government for the respect of my right to travel. So I have my hands full with that.
Whatever you want to claim, whatever you're going to exercise, again, you have to make sure that you are able to stand alone. When you're standing with no books before you, where no references are there, and it's just you with your knowledge of your rights and freedoms, then you are ready to go and fight for what it is that you want to acquire. If you don't have that ability, you're playing with fire, you're playing with danger.
Yeah, you can't go into this haphazardly. You really have to be aware and conscious of what your rights are and how to invoke them and how to enforce them. Or else you're going to be sliding down a slippery slope.
And you can never even think about getting access to your patrimony or making appropriations off of the Consolidated Revenue Fund if you don't first take your recognition as a human being.
So the claim of right is a must. It's the first step.
It's the foundation. Well, it's the foundation because what it actually is, besides telling the state party about what you've realized, it actually is you expressing what you've realized. When you sit down there and you write a claim of recognition, a claim of right, that you don't copy and paste, but that you bring out the operations of law that frees the human being based upon the international laws, based upon the domestic laws, then this is your real understanding. This is part of you now.
Yeah, and I would like to urge all the callers that have some measure of interest in this to actually contact your governors at the state level, at the federal level, at the local level, and ask them questions about human rights. See what kind of responses you'll get back. It would be an interesting little test to run. Hello?
Yes.
Yes, there's somebody in the background there.
Oh,
a
not
child
here.
or something.
Oh, not on my end.
Maybe it's a caller. I think it was a 661 caller. Maybe is still on the line. The gentleman that just asked this question.
I think that was David.
No, the gentleman just recently from
Yeah,
America.
You're right. Oh.
Yeah, from America. I think his mic is still hot and we can hear the background noise.
Yeah,
he can
now
mute
it's
his
off.
mic. Okay.
Now it's off.
Okay.
You see, a lot of people are under the assumption that there's unending wealth available, and I don't know where this comes from. I can state a few systems that are out there teaching this, but for the sake of privacy, I won't name any names. But there's a lot of people out there that are under the impression that we can have access to unlimited wealth, to just tens of millions of dollars, and we can do anything that we want with this money. And even if we operate or get an appropriation off the Consolidated Revenue Fund, we can do anything we want. That's not true. The rights and freedoms that are backed by monetary value are expressed in the international covenants. And those rights that are supposed to be met are what you can discharge.
So you're saying, John, the people that are going after their bond that apparently is worth millions. Is that what you're saying?
Okay, go ahead.
The people that are claiming that they have millions and going after their bonds?
Yes. Well, my question to that would be is where do you find that expression in law? I can find an expression in law that says the state party, whether it's America or Canada, owes me some obligations. And these obligations that they owe me, it's going to cost them a monetary value. But I can't find a place where it says that I have a complete security that I can take in cash.
Yeah, that's not expressed anywhere.
Well, I know a lot of people are under that impression that they can, and they have a bond worth millions, and they're entitled to it.
It may very well be worth millions, but
yeah.
It can't be used beyond what we can claim, what we can lawfully claim. Like
even when you understand here in Quebec, because I'm here in Quebec, but when you understand the operation of law of your act of birth, that you're holding your guarantor, that you're holding your security in your hand, there's no monetary value attached to that act of birth. It doesn't say, well, it's worth $5 million or $10 million, but it states that documentation to you is your guarantee. They're your guarantor. And that documentation puts them in an obligation to fulfill your rights and freedoms. Now, it takes a monetary value to do that. To what amount, it's different for every individual.
I have another Skype question here, John.
Yeah.
Is this possible if you haven't received yours yet? How possible is it?
If what's possible if I haven't received what yet?
I think the appropriation.
Yeah, they're talking about the appropriation.
Oh, well, I shouldn't respond to that caller. Next time, caller, when you write a question, please listen to the conversation and ask an appropriate question. Mm-hmm. I did not say that I never accomplished it. I said that I am in a battle right now because I've suffered some consequences this year for having revealed all this to my fellow Canadians.
Very good. Hope that answers his question.
This is not about only money. I know it's about they have an obligation to back our human rights and freedoms, and there is monetary value attached to it, but get it out of your head and get it out of your heart that this is about dollar bills only. Because if the system crashes, guess what? You know what? Human rights and human fundamental freedoms are still in operation, and I still need to respect you, and you still need to respect me, and I shouldn't be involved in things that are like, I don't really want to go down that road, but like watching another man get murdered or shot in the head because I like the movie, and then I'm going to come and say I'm a human rights and fundamental freedom. How do you say that? I promote that.
Yeah, activist.
Yes.
That's the thing. Money is just a means to an end. And what are the ends that we are looking for? The ends that we are looking for is a standard of life that is fair and equal for all of us.
Imagine you can get a hold of $5 million or $10 million, whatever it is that you're imagining, because you love money so much. But you don't understand your human rights and freedoms. And you don't understand that you've been yoked to the government. What good is that? When they make calls upon you, when they put burdens upon you, and you can't shake them off. What good is that when they come and they try to charge you with something and you can't shake it off because you don't understand?
Very good point, John. That's awesome. Or if everything collapses, you won't be able to eat your money anyway.
There you go.
Exactly.
So, or your things, or your cars.
You know why? It's because we've been taught that everything is commercial. But you know who's to blame for that? I'll tell you. It's the government. Because if you look into international covenants, and here we go again, okay, they had an obligation to educate. The obligation to teach education, to educate individuals, was placed upon the government, the state party, that being the government of Canada or the government of the United States of America. Now, the type of education that they were supposed to give us were as follows. We were first supposed to be taught our fundamental human rights and freedoms, how they apply to us, how they impact our lives, and how they operate here within our state party's country. And then secondarily, they were supposed to teach people how to operate in a commercial society. Now, what they did is, in their educational systems, they totally removed any teaching concerning human rights and fundamental freedoms that were available to you, and they only taught you how to operate as a people, as a person. Which is what? Which is that you need to get a good education, find a good job, get a good paying job, get a house, get a wife, and live that type of lifestyle.
Yeah,
join in the rat race. And be sick by the time you're 50.
Yeah, exactly. But
on medication.
But what they do is they enforce the person's right through education. They say that you have to be able to work. You have to pursue a living. You see, a human being can enjoy a living, but the person has to pursue a living. And it comes out into education, because from the beginning you start education, you know that I'm getting an education for what reason? To go get a job, because I have to earn and pursue after a living. But they never taught you as a human being that you don't have to pursue. You can enjoy a living. And that's where your patrimony starts to come in.
Imagine how life would be for all those struggling artists out there. You know, it's a very hard line of work to pursue your living being an artist.
It's also hard to pursue your living with only getting minimum wage. The corporations actually would have to pay you what you're worth if they want you.
Fair enough.
Terry, that's a very good point. And you know, we say that the government is supposed to be the servant on behalf of the public, or the servant on behalf of the people. Well, what if the government was getting paid minimum wage? I wonder how many of these politicians would remain in their offices.
Exactly.
They're supposed to be the servant, so if anyone should get a minimum wage, they should get the minimum wage.
And we all know that's clearly not the case, just by looking at the salaries that some of these people make. Or having
their houses.
Yeah, or having spent a 4-year term in office, coming out millionaires. You know,
it's sad.
They're lining their own pockets.
Yeah.
At our expense.
Yeah.
Is there any more questions coming in from the Skype channel?
Not as of yet, but I'm sure there will be. I have so many dots here. I can't keep track.
So every okay, let's get a little bit, it seems that there's people interested in the patrimony, so I'll just get a little bit more into it, because we only have about 12 minutes left on the show.
Yeah.
Each province, every year, okay, the federal government, it appropriates certain amount of funds to each province. and the funds that they appropriate to each province only goes into public systems. So let's say Ontario, British Columbia, Quebec, we all have a welfare system. So a certain amount of money goes into that welfare system. And then we all have an unemployment system. So a certain amount of money goes into that unemployment system. Now, those unemployment system and welfare systems, they're supposed to be there to support you. Okay, they're supposed to support you in your time of need if things are going bad or whatever. Now, whoever has used these systems, they realize that they're insufficient. They don't meet your needs as a human being. The whole gist of it is that there's no obligation on these systems for you as a human being. So they take your money again and they appropriate it into a public system, but this public system is used upon the Canadian citizen or upon the person. Thereby, they bypass their obligation and their responsibility to you as a human being.
Yep. And I guess the question I would have is, what would it take for a country or other, whether it be Canada, the United States, European countries, for them to actually use a system like this where it could actually disperse the natural wealth to everybody? How could that be achieved?
The first thing it's going to take is honesty.
I agree. I was reading up on Russia Today a couple of months ago where they were proposing or just thinking about having 20-year imprisonment terms for corruption at levels of government. I think that would be a very good place to start.
Oh, yeah, I think so too. I second that motion.
If all these people that claim to represent us were actually held accountable, I think we'd have a very different system.
Yes. There is a lack of accountability within the system, that is for sure.
But this is the thing, like, it's going to be hard for an entire country or an entire nation to go about doing this, changing the whole, well, not changing, but altering the structure of the system to kind of serve the human being. But on an individual basis, it is possible. You can make a change in your life with this information.
Well, look at it like this. Even we're 33 million people or 36 million people in Canada. Even if you have 1 million people who understand this and come to wake up and begin to exercise their rights and freedoms and begin to designate themselves and stand under of a human being or man and woman, it's not going to destroy the system. There's no danger to their system. But, I mean, ultimately, you would have to say that this is not right and it needs to come down. I mean, why is it the fact that a few are getting rich, a few are enriching themselves and taking the wealth of the many? You know, all the people, all the persons who work to earn their living. And part of that work, part of that wealth is being turned over to a system, and that wealth is being taken and redistributed to a few people or a few individuals.
Yeah, and what I find very interesting is that you have in the United States with the sovereign movement, and here in Canada with the free man movement, the states are trying to label us, the states meaning the countries, they're trying to label us as anti-government. And that really isn't the case. At least in my opinion of things, I would say that I'm anti-corrupt government, because we do need some sort of a structure for all this to work. If it were to function for the benefit of the human being, a structure is needed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so just like
if they were actually doing their job, what they were supposed to be doing as the trustees.
Yeah, we're like...
Very good word, Terry. Very good word. Because they are your trustee, exactly. That's the position that they have over your security, over your patrimony. But they only have that right to take that title because they claim that you are still a child.
Yeah. We're entrusting these politicians with all our money, and they're buying $1 million mansions in Hawaii.
So I think we all need to go and declare that we're not minors anymore, John. Eh, Sergio?
That'd be a good place to start.
That's part of your claim of recognition. Well, when you claim to be when you do a claim of recognition, what some people refer to as a claim of right, that's where you start to let them know that, listen, I am designated, I'm a man, a woman, a human being, and therefore I'm not a child anymore, and therefore your operation of law as a constructive registered holder has been severed, and this security is supposed to devolve back unto me. That's the operation of law. It's called devolving the security back onto the to the holder. But sometimes it takes that you have to go to court. You have no choice. And if you go to court, it's not that difficult, because like Sergio was saying, the Bank Act is very clear, and it comes out very clear that what position they are operating under.
I have a quick question for you, John. Just
Yes.
to clarify for the listeners, is there a place anywhere on your website where they can actually look at a claim of rights, not to copy, but to actually just try and see what it would look like? Because I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of callers listening in, and they're like, okay, well, we have to claim our rights, but how do we go about doing? Like, does it have to like provide like a specific form, or what information?
There's
needs
tons of
to be
them on
included?
YouTube, eh?
If you go on to eternallyaware.com and then you click on the new website intrinsicfreedoms.com, you're going to see, surf that page and you're going to see an example of a claim of recognition for human rights. It's not a complete claim, but it just shows you the different operations of law that are there internationally and how they come out domestically and where you should be claiming these rights from.
I would highly suggest to all the listeners, those that are interested, that would be a good place to start looking.
Yes.
Absolutely. That's where I learned my human rights. I didn't even know I had any.
I didn't even know I had any. As I was trying to say in the beginning, before I was having a lot of trouble with the microphone, I was very unaware of there was something called human rights and fundamental freedoms. And it's only thanks to the free man movement here in Canada that awakened me to the fact that there was something going on in law.
Yeah, the first thing I heard was that we're not a person, we have a person.
Yes.
So that's what made me look into it as well. And reading the Mary Croft book and made me aware of what's been happening, and then coming to your site, because I don't think there's any other site that teaches your human rights like yours, John. Your site's unparalleled to teaching you what is in the law, what they hid from us in the law. You teach it at a grade 1 level that anyone can understand.
Thank you.
With your whiteboard and circling, and I think that's a great place to start. It's very easy to understand, because trying to understand this on my own, I was lost, because so many people saying, well, no, the laws apply to government, not us. We don't need to do this, and we don't need to do that. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm all confused. But you put it in order from step 1 to step 500, all in order. It's very simple to understand. So that's a good place for all you listeners to start, is eternallyaware.com. If you want to learn your human rights, I suggest you go there and start learning and take some action.
And be prepared to be exposed to something that's going to rock your world, because when you begin to really understand that all this has been hidden from you, it's hard to take. It's hard to digest for the first little while.
Yeah,
when you really
you
begin
get
to
angry
understand the impact on you.
Yeah, you start getting depressed and angry in the beginning when you first start to learn. And then you have to get over your anger, and I think that's the hardest to get over.
Yes, you're angry because you realize that you slave to a system, and they did it to you in deception.
Exactly.
And that's another thing. We have to be really compassionate when taking an approach like this, because there's no use in getting angry about what they've done, because the truth of the situation is that the people that are working in government that are enforcing these laws, they don't know. They don't know what has transpired.
Yeah.
So it's very important to be compassionate when confronting this information, and to engage it with an open mind.
I agree 100%, but there's one time you have to put that, well, not really put the compassion in the pocket, but where you got to stand up, and you know where that is, when you're standing in a court of law.
Yes, because there will be those that try to protect the system at all costs.
Well, we have
you
a
have
few
to be ready
minutes
to battle.
left. We have a few minutes left, John, if you want to make any announcements, or when you're on.
I'm good to go. Well, we're going to be back here next week, and there's going to be me, Sergio, and hopefully Terry again next week.
That's good. Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I hope
Sergio,
everyone enjoyed their first show. Like John and I had said before, we're new to this. This is the first time we do something of this nature, so we hope it went pretty well for the listeners, and we hope we give them enough food for thought and enough information to start going out there and look on their own. Yeah,
to wonder, to say, hey, what's going on? I've never heard of human rights and fundamental freedoms, and I've heard of it, but only casually. And how does this apply to me? Yeah, and at the end of the day, I'd be really happy if we piqued the interest of
at least some of the callers. You know, it's like the information has to get out there. Like in times that that we're treading right now, this is something that I feel is very important, and it could produce a big change.
There's so much freedom that if it affords to an American, I don't like to say this, but to an American citizen, to a human being living in America, the same applications of law that are present in Canada or any other Commonwealth nation are found in American law also. So the same freedoms, the same human rights and freedoms are available to all Americans.
Yeah, and like we had stated before, it's through Article 9 of the Constitution where you can actually invoke these international covenants and charters. Because the deeper you dig into these international documents, you realize that they have an obligation to include this doorway for us as human beings, and they have through that article of law.
Yeah, because if they like we said, if they didn't, then we're just all in slavery.
Exactly. So I know from my experience and from John's experience, to all the American listeners, we're trying to do the best we can, trying to relay the information. We have a lot more experience with the Canadian side of things, but it's not all that different on the American side. You know, they use the same type of tricks to hide and conceal our human rights.
They can also, the listeners can also go to and stop by on Freedom Reigns to get the next show's details.
Oh,
if
yes.
they wish.
Awesome. So I guess we're going to wrap up the show for today.
Yes, we're going to call it a day, and thank you for all the listeners tuning in, and thank you for bearing with us in our first show, and hopefully as we do more, we'll become more adept at presenting this information.
Thank you, guys. It was a great show.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure being on.
Thank you, John.